This is Start Your Startup, Resources for Energy Entrepreneurs. And before we actually officially get started, I do want to thank my co-organizer for the panel, Heather Richmond, for securing some of these great speakers that we have. So past energy summits have included VC panels and covered trends in clean tech funding. But while VCs play a really important in many sectors, including energy, other sources of funding might be a better fit for some organizations, and there are a host of resources that entrepreneurs and small businesses need to succeed and grow. So the goals for this panel are to become familiar with a broader mix of funding sources and understand their advantages and disadvantages, find out about other services and resources entrepreneurs need to succeed and where to find them, learn what questions entrepreneurs should ask before taking funding, things to consider around protecting IP, negotiating good deals, and signing up with incubator services. And finally, I'm hoping the panel here will share any tips they've accumulated over years of working with small businesses and entrepreneurs about the pitfalls they need to avoid and things that will help them succeed. So today's session is going to be largely interactive. I've got a few questions lined up, but I encourage all of you to be thinking about them as well. If we have questions, we'll take them from the center of the room, and when I see enough people lined up, I'll stop asking and let you guys ask. So that's a good way to switch things over. I also want to note that people attending this session might be interested in some of the conversation for action tables that'll be taking place after this session. So for example, Larry Kelly, who's speaking here, will also be one of the experts on the Financing Green Projects panel. And Adam Gottlieb, who's a colleague of Mike Gravely's, will be talking about expanding the community of energy entrepreneurs and how CEC and its funding programs can be accessed. So detailed bios are in the program, but I do want to quickly do a little introduction. We have Mike Gravely, Deputy Division for Energy Research, California Energy Commission. One of CEC's core missions is to support energy research that advances energy science and technology through research development and demonstration projects. We also have Larry Kelly, Chief Executive Officer of Kelly Ventures, essentially a private investment vehicle, but also the chair of the Band of Angels Special Interest Group covering energy and clean tech. Since '94, the band has invested some $230 million in a variety of sectors, including energy, and he also works with the MIT and Harvard Angels. Don Lippert is the founder and director of the Energy Accelerator, which helps energy companies succeed by providing funding and enabling strategic relationships. Funded by the U.S. Office of Naval Research, the Accelerator is also funded by the U.S. Department of Energy, the state of Hawaii, and private investors. They help companies deploy their technologies in Hawaii and the Asia-Pacific regions with the idea that that can help them succeed in the mainland and other world markets as well. And finally, we have Vern Norviel, a partner at Wilson Sonsini, Goodrich, and Rosati. This law firm has a practice focused on energy and clean tech that serves some 400 clients. The team provides strategic counsel to emerging companies, but also represents many of the leading venture capital firms. I'd like to start the session off by giving each of the panelists an opportunity to introduce themselves, give a brief description of their role in their organization, and tell us why energy entrepreneurs should work with you. And Don, why don't we start with you? We'll just go down the panel.
Absolutely. First of all, thanks so much for having me, and thanks for setting up this panel. This is one of my favorite things to do, meet new entrepreneurs. Actually, last year at this very summit, we met one of our great portfolio companies, Brightbox Technologies. So we're looking for more right now. As Barbara said, I run the Energy Accelerator, which we founded about 6 years ago in Hawaii. We're a national program funding companies from all over the country, largely with Navy money as well as Department of Energy and private investor money. So we can go into more details of exactly how that works. We fund about 16 companies a year, so we're a relatively active investor in this space. We're looking for companies all the way from early stage, just post-prototype, all the way to post-Series A. So very wide range of stages that we work with. We're really looking for great teams with companies that can commercialize and use Hawaii and the Asia Pacific and the unique geographic and economic conditions there as a launching point for their business. So a way to really get into some of these high-cost markets early and then use that to come down the cost curve and scale elsewhere. So we're looking for companies right now as well as investors, and our applications are open until next week. We extended it especially for our trip out here. So July 2nd is when our applications close for new companies. And our best source of companies is referrals and other companies. So would love to hear more about what you folks are working on after this session. And Heather Richmond is our mainland presence here. So most of our team's based in Hawaii, but we also have her here in Palo Alto. So feel free to reach out to myself or any of our team members that you see here today.
Thanks. I'm with the Band of Angels. I chair the energy space for the band. The band is one of the oldest professionally organized investment groups in the country. There are over 160 of us in the band. Today we invest in life sciences, information tech, and energy, and included in energy are clean tech and water and resources and sustainability and so forth. The energy space is a little new for us in the sense that we got active in it about 6 or 7 years ago. One of the focuses for us in terms of our membership is of the 160 of us, mostly we are operating executives. And that's one of the things that differentiates us from other investment groups. And most of our people have, most of our group have started and built and run companies. And so they have that ability to understand what someone's particular problem is, and they've probably been there before, they've probably solved it before. So it's all hands-on. We got active in the energy space, as I say, 6 or 7 years ago. We typically meet with 100 to 125, maybe 150 companies every year for an hour or more, on the theory that we don't know that much about it, and maybe we can learn something, maybe we can help, and maybe we can give some advice that would help some companies grow. We have invest in maybe 4 or 5 per year out of that number, which is maybe a little higher number than other venture groups, but that's because we typically will work with someone for a while before we do make an investment. Sometimes it's been as long as 2 years. We have a spectacular portfolio company that's building a new string inverter for the PV space that we worked with for a little more than 2 years before we wrote checks, and they're just doing gangbusters. We're early, so we invest early, typically the round after friends and family. There aren't, as everybody knows, there's a big hole in this space after, the VCs have left the room. But some of them are coming back. I understand that one of the long-time energy clean tech VC firms has raised a fund recently, closed on a fund recently. So, I think one of the things to think about is who can you work with, who can you partner with, who can help you through the various stages, including this dip with the VC. So, strategics, private equity, and all the other kinds of things.
Thanks, Larry. Mike.
Thank you. So I'm Mike Raveley from the California Energy Commission. I've been in the R&D business for over 30 years, and I've been at the commission for 13 of those years. And so what we do is we award mostly competitive awards for energy research across the full spectrum of energy efficiency, renewables, advanced generation.
Just a minute. Can people hear in the back? I want to make sure. Okay. Could you a little closer? Thank you.
Okay, so we cover the full spectrum of energy areas, and one of the interesting elements we do award about $150 million a year. I was just thinking, the way things are working out over the next 4 to 5 years, we're going to actually award about $500 million worth of energy research efforts. And so it's also unique in the sense what we shifted to now is we have with the major program is the electricity program. It's called the Electric Program Investment Charge, the EPIC program, and we do a 3-year plan. The first plan that we're halfway through is published on the website. The second plan, which handles 15 through 17, and that plan was approved by the PUC a month ago. It's also available on our website. So we lay out our multi-year plans, and then we go out and execute those awards. In many cases, the awards we do, we will award 15 to 30% of the proposals. So we might get 20 or 30 proposals, and we might award 3 to 5 to 7 or 10 proposal awards, depending on how much money is in a particular pot. And so that for people that are interested, we do lay out a multi-year plan. We do have a continual round of funding, and there's an opportunity to learn. I mean, for new businesses, I would encourage you to start as a subcontractor. For all of our awards, we have a pre-bid meeting where people come in and talk and ask questions, and we encourage partnerships so people can come to those meetings and partner up with people that are bidding it right away in the next round. We also have public meetings, and we have a LinkedIn site for people to partner with also. So we encourage people people to do that. It's a very public, open process. I want to introduce Adam because the next session, he's actually going to have a table. If you have specific questions, him and I will be there also if you have questions about contracts, and I'll answer questions later. But in general, it's a unique opportunity. We do electricity, we do natural gas. We also future be doing some water energy because of the crisis. And then in addition to the R&D division, we have a transportation division who receives $100 million a year to do work in the area of alternative fuels and network construction, electric vehicles. And so they also work mostly through a competitive process. The biggest difference between the two divisions is they're much more into the deployment phase, and we're in the full spectrum of applied research, deployment, demonstration, and market facilitation. So we cover the full spectrum, and together we put quite a bit of resources that are publicly available from that perspective. So with that, we'll go from there.
We can get more details on all of those programs as the session moves on. Vern?
So my name is Vern, and I have a confession to make, which is I'm a lawyer. But to partially redeem myself, I'm also an electrical and chemical engineer. So I actually really made energy back when I was young. I worked in the oil fields in North Dakota and Colorado, and I helped design offshore oil platforms, which made me very popular in Santa Barbara. So, so some of them are still standing, I think. So I work at a large firm named Wilson Sonsini. We focus entirely on entrepreneurial companies of various sorts, and of course, energy's a big part of what we do these days. When it comes to my work in energy, it's always chemistry or clean tech, biotech kind of companies. So, for example, I helped start Amyris, liquid metal battery companies, and so on. But we do, as a firm, do the full spectrum of energy technologies from solar, wind, et cetera.
So, Vern, I'll jump in right away with the question. Everybody knows and wants money right from the start. They know when they need it and they want to get it. But when do people know when it's appropriate to engage a law firm? And at what stage should people here be thinking about working with a firm like yours?
Right. So typically, many or most of our clients, I would say, are three people wandering in from the streets, like Stanford. You know, Google, as an example, was three guys that wandered in off the streets from Stanford over across the street here. So you really do need to have a company formed to do things like get grants and so forth. SBIRs aren't even available unless you have a company formed. So it's typically very, very early on. That's the bad news, that you have to deal with lawyers at all. But the good news is that that part of it's actually quite easy if you're dealing with a firm. And I'm not going to advertise Wilson too much. There are a number of good firms in the area, and it should be very easy to get the company formed. If you need a license from university, that should be very straightforward with the major schools, forming a stock plan and so on. You've got to do that to get an entrepreneurial business going. But then, of course, your law firm is going to stick with you, and we represent companies like Solar City and so on. So they'll be able to stick with you and do all the things to do the big project finance, IPOs, hopefully, and sale of the company, hopefully, if it's successful. So it starts pretty early on, and I do have kind of a joke that frequently our companies, they go through a stage where the CEO doesn't really have anybody to talk to yet, except for there may be one or two partners and their lawyer. And so we tend to get, I get a lot more phone and email traffic from my very early companies than later on.
Okay. So, Larry, past sessions have talked about VC funding, and I'm just wondering how working with the Band of Angels is similar or different. You aren't VCs, but yet you're sort of taking a role that's similar to VCs.
Yeah, so there are a number of differences. One is well, as I mentioned before, I think most of the VCs have left the space, and so we're contrarians in that sense. So we think this is a great time to be in this space. First, second, most VC firms work off of a fund where they have limited partners, and most angel investors are investing off their own balance sheet. It's their own money, and I think there's a personal bias that I think a lot of VC firms have a drive-by investing as opposed to getting involved and helping build a company. So I think that's different as well. So as an example of that, we made an investment in a company called MBA Polymers in 1999, I believe it was, and we've been in with them for 7 rounds. And they're now the world's largest hard plastics recycler. So I think those are some of the key differences.
Okay. Mike, Vern was saying the first thing somebody needs to do with an idea is to set up a company. Do CECs exclusively work with companies, or can individual entrepreneurs also apply for CEC grants before they've even got a company?
Normally, for the majority of our efforts, you have to be registered with the Secretary of State, which means you have to be a corporation versus an individual. We do have a small grant program where we allow individuals to participate, which is usually the startup types. It's $150,000 or left in funding, but if you're going into the other contracts, you are required to be registered with the state, which means you have to be an LLC or some type of corporation. So yes, I'd say if you're interested in the larger agreements, that's yes. If you're interested in just an opportunity, there is, and there's a lot of people who do that, but we have awarded many agreements in the small grant arena to individuals who in fact were successful from then going into a company after they use that money to prove the product would work or prove the concept. They take the next step and actually form a company and build the product.
Okay, great. So Don, when do companies usually come to an accelerator or consider going to an accelerator, and why?
Yeah, absolutely. So on the more general side, accelerators tend to be pretty early stage in the energy space, and there are a number of them around the country. And often those accelerators provide around $15,000, $20,000, maybe up to $100,000 convertible note for companies in this space. And there are also a number of incubators which we work with around the country and are really fantastic resources for companies. Our accelerator in particular is a little bit different. We're looking for later stage companies. So we provide up to $1 million of grant funding per company. So that tends to take us a little bit later stage. And our key differentiator is looking to fund projects that can be transformative for those companies. So one example I'll give is STEM, a company we started working with a couple of years ago. And many of you may know that they have a distributed energy storage technology, and they had installed that in a number of different buildings here in California. But their real vision and what they really wanted to do was be able to knit those together at the utility level and deploy them at the utility. So turn the button over to the utility and say you can actually deploy these energy storage systems when you need them and when you have too much solar on the grid or too much wind or you need extra capacity. So that's the project that we worked with them and our utility in Hawaii, Hawaiian Electric Company, to design and implement and do a megawatt of energy storage there and develop a new rate and sort of a new regulatory structure under which to do that. For them, they'll identify that as a really transformative project for their company. They took that experience doing that and bid into the SoCal Edison RFP the following year, and they end up winning 85 megawatts of the SoCal Edison RFP for distributed storage based on that model. So that's the kind of project we're really looking for, something that can be transformative for a company, really important to Hawaii, and hopefully help them scale.
Thanks. You were talking about storage, and I'm hearing a lot about that sector as being very important right now. I wondered, and I'll throw this out to whoever, maybe 2 or 3 of you want to respond, but just kind of trends in energy and clean tech. What's hot now? What do you see coming? How long will current trends last? How frequently do things flip around? Whatever you want, whatever insight you have, I guess, on what folks are looking for, and that could be from market drivers or regulatory drivers. What opportunities, I guess, do you see in the market for people considering starting a new company to address energy and clean tech needs?
Well, I guess I'll start that off. One of the strong trends that we're seeing right now is the mirroring of some of the interesting things going on in energy happening in transportation and water. So taking some of those lessons, and we're moving very quickly into funding a number of water and transportation and security companies. So seeing a lot of those lessons move into that space. Another example I'll give is Bidgley, one of our portfolio companies. They're a COSLA-funded company, and they're experts in disaggregation. So they can put one little device outside your home and then see if you're using your washer or your dishwasher, or maybe you left something on or left your fridge open. And so they're experts in disaggregation. And one of the things that we're starting to see now this year is that same approach for water. So different technology, obviously, but that same need for small sensors and disaggregation technology. So one of the things that we're really excited to see is this crossover across industries.
So I'll just talk briefly about storage, because yes, it is a very hot item right now. And of course, for those that are most aware that the PUC has reduced a a storage mandate to the utilities, and they'll be purchasing an additional 1,000 megawatts of storage over the next 6 years, 6 to 8 years. Every 2 years, they do a competitive round. And so people that, but in those cases, they're looking for products that are a little more mature. So, part of the things that we do and work on is we're developing tools and guidelines to help startup companies build their capabilities so they can bid in that round and do those. So take a a commission contract and demonstrate the technology and then be able to prove to the PUC and the utilities that their product, because they're ultimately, we're looking for better products and cheaper products, and that's what people are bringing to the table. And if we don't allow them to participate, then we're not going to get the benefit of those in the future. So I think the storage is an area where there is a very distinctive, the CEC is putting out storage awards over the next 5 to 6 years. You'll see those on an every couple of year basis. The PUC is putting out awards. So there is an opportunity, there is a defined market, more so than there has been. I mean, I've been involved in storage for 30 years, and so this is the most active I've ever seen storage. I mean, the one challenge, of course, is there's a lot of companies out there, and probably more than will make it. But there's certainly, for companies that are well established and doing good work, there's opportunity to continue to do that, so that there will always be a need for storage systems that are, as you've heard, there's some limitations on the length of the batteries and different things like that. If you can build a technology that provides more storage or better storage, I think you'll find opportunity in the marketplace.
Larry, you've been in this a while.
I guess what I would say is I think storage, I agree, storage is hot. PV is hot. Incorporating intelligence into devices, whether you call it IoT or whatever, I think software is also extremely interesting. And of course, we have the drought. So water, well, it's vital, right? But I think another way to think about it is that the changes that we make, the innovations and the breakthroughs that we make in these areas are not large. They're 2, 10, 15, 20% kind of things, and that's tough. That means that the payoff time has to be a lot longer. The adoption cycle has to be a lot longer, and so I would maybe make a couple of kinds of encouragement. One of them is trying to find a bigger breakthrough, like the Jaws movie. You're going to need a bigger boat, right? So if you can make a bigger breakthrough, there is too much money chasing too few deals, right? And every great company gets funded. So if you can make a larger breakthrough, you increase your odds of raising a lot of money more quickly. You don't want to raise too much money, then you get in the cylinder problem, So that would be one. The other is stick with it. Never quit, never give up. It takes a long time in this space relative to what we're used to in Silicon Valley in the information space for things to come to fruition and to have the impact. Approval cycles or adoption cycles by customers, or whether they happen to be the end user or a utility company, it's a long time. Right? It's a very long time. Right?
So I would just add one thing, because I think it's the topic for this afternoon. We do a lot of work with the military, in particular the Navy, and Secretary McGinn. And of all the services, the Navy has been putting money where their mouth is. They're interested in clean energy. They've got goals for renewables. They're investing. We've done several projects and doing more projects with them. So I think one of the benefits, we try and get our companies that are successful to be able to work with the military and get themselves into the military procurement system. Those that have tried, I have a military background. It's not easy, but once you get in there, it's worth it. And so I think that there's an opportunity for high-tech companies now. As a matter of fact, they come to us looking for technologies to demonstrate. So, I mean, they've got a system set up. So I would encourage people that are interested in markets to look at the services. In particular, the Navy is the most progressive right now. I'm an Air Force guy, but I have to be honest. The Navy right now is doing quite a bit, and you'll hear from Secretary McGinn that they're putting a lot of resources with it and a lot of priority with it. So they're actually committing to things. So there is a huge opportunity for those that are interested in those types of technologies with the military. And again, they do a lot of public work and open solicitations, so you can find that out. But I would encourage people that are interested. That is a great opportunity. It is a timing, and it hasn't been this way for 20 years. The last 3 to 5 years have been more than they've done in my 30 years of doing business with them. So I think there's an opportunity to consider seriously about taking your knowledge and, again, working with other government agencies and then leveraging that to get yourself into the military.
Vern, did you want to add something?
This sounds trite, but the clean tech revolution from a few years ago, I think the thing that's changed over the last couple of years, and again, I apologize if it sounds trite, is that it is possible to raise money these days, but it can't be flash and shine. You really, I think, can be very successful in raising money if you can show that you're going to make money. And I know that sounds silly, but I don't think it was silly a few years ago. I think there were a number of companies financed that probably didn't really have a viable plan for doing that, and the story was, well, it's clean, so therefore it should be a company. But I think today it's more of a story of this is how we're going to make money. And storage, I think, is an example of that, where one of my companies in Boston is called Ambry. It's a battery storage company. It's a coastal company, I think. And they have a very viable story about how they can make money with those batteries. And I think people do, they lost track of that for a while a few years ago, but I think that's back. It happens in lots of industries, and it happened in the clean energy area, but I think it always comes back to you got to have a great story for making a lot of money.
Don, Mike brought up military support, and I know you're working with the Navy as well. Is that right? Do you want to talk a little bit about how that partnership works and how they got involved?
Sure. Yeah, it's really interesting. So the Navy committed a few years ago to $30 million. They've funded us pretty significantly since the about 2013 at the Energy Accelerator. And we're actually a pretty unusual partner for the Navy. So we're a nonprofit, but our role with the Navy is rapid commercialization of technology. So they have huge technology needs that they've identified, and they know that they can't actually fund that all the way from research to deployment, and it doesn't make sense for them financially to do that. So they're looking for private partnerships to do that. So we're a tool that they use for rapid commercialization of technology that might someday be of interest to them. We deploy a lot of projects with the Navy, but we also mostly deploy projects in the commercial space and give that data and information to the Navy so that they can move it through their procurement if it looks like something that would be of interest to them. So we're really focused on speed, but kind of aligning right along with the Navy as we do that. And it's been a really valuable partnership for us so far and for the companies we work with. So yeah, I would definitely echo what Mike says about the military being a really interesting partner now, but also very difficult partner for many startups. So navigating that process is part of why we exist and how we help companies.
Okay. So I'd like to think that there are things that exist for free in the world, but I have yet to have that prove true. So what does it cost to work with each of you, either in terms of time or giving up IP or other factors? And actually, maybe Vern, I'll start with you. Is it strictly fee for service, or can people give up some equity in exchange, or what? How does?
So at Wilson, and I think there are other firms that do this as well, we definitely have creative fee arrangements. Again, poking Google again, they had a creative fee arrangement. They didn't have any money when they wandered in. So we do defer fees. It's not free, but it's very reasonable, of course. But we do defer fees in return for equity, and we're very happy to do that with a company that has a credible business model. We also, of course, give significant discounts for private companies and so forth. We and a few other firms also have a venture fund at Wilson. So almost always, when we're sufficiently jazzed about doing something where we'll do the work on a deferred basis, we'll also invest in the company. It's not big bites of money, but it's enough to kind of get through. It kind of repays the lawyer bills, is what it does. So $50,000 or $100,000 in a seed round or a Series A, and I think there are a few other firms that do that as well. I would point out that one thing when you're talking, it is an unfortunate thing that all of you will have to deal with lawyers. But on the other hand, the lawyer part should be a trivial part of what the lawyer's contributing. We see enough deal flow, and again, others do too, that you should be looking for somebody that's going to have venture connections, and they're going to know what a Series A term sheet should look like, and they're going to be able to tell you that before it even comes in, and they know what to negotiate on and what to back off on, and they know who to connect you with for project finance when the bigger money comes in, and what the normal deals are there, and what your pitch book should look like. So a law firm really, especially for an early stage company, should be doing a lot more than being lawyers. They really should be a business partner that you feel like they're sitting there in the boardroom and making a real contribution.
We'll just go down the row. Mike, why don't you?
Yeah, so I think for the government in general, again, I have a lot of experience. I would say the government getting into it, if you've never done it before, I would encourage you to take it slow and normally be a subcontractor before you try prime. But obviously, I think being a prime contractor at the commission now, we've kind of made this in our office, we've kind of changed things a little bit. If you went back 3 or 4 years, our average award was probably $700,000 to $1 million. As we move forward, we expect our average award to be closer to $3 to $5 million. So that just takes a little bit more commitment when you do that. And I think also, I've worked in the private industry, and I went around trying to sell the company. And it's funny, some venture capitals and some investments like people who do military because they have to do. They've got a good accounting system. They've been audited before and other things, and those types of things. So it does require you to do a structured business. It requires you to be able to do reports and prevent financial documents and stuff, to prepare proposals. But I mean, if you're looking for short money, quick money, I think the government's the wrong way. If you're looking, in our case, if you're looking for long term, if you're looking for multiple awards and a long term commitment, I think it's worth the investment. Particularly with the fact that, in the environment we're in now, there's kind of you can look and see what areas are going to be offered, and the amount of money being offered is pretty much public, so it gives you a chance to plan ahead. Many companies do that. They'll take our plans and lay them all out, and then they'll come ask us questions. And we have public workshops to discuss that too. So I think if you're interested in government business, you have to take it serious. Government business is more difficult than I think in some cases private business is. But it also has that stability. When you get to be a bigger business, it doesn't make a difference. You got to have the same functions, and I think you just need them sooner if you're going to do government business.
I guess 2 follow-up questions. Is a company's investment considered in proposal evaluations? And I think sometimes it is and sometimes it isn't. And then also, do you retain any rights to the IP?
What I would say is, you have to assess stability. I mean, we're managing public funds. We don't want to award it to a company that's going to spend half of them and go bankrupt. So we want to get a company that's got a good chance of succeeding, and we want that they can deliver what they promise. So yeah, I think part of that is when you evaluate a proposal, it's the companies, their stability and their ability to express what they're going to do. You mentioned before about looking ahead. It's the same thing for us. It's their ability to express what they're going to do with the money and how they're going to leverage that for the future. So I think that's part of it is doing that. But I, so I think, in general, it is an important part. I will bring up, and IP is a big issue with the legislature right now. We have IP requirements in our contracts, but if you look at them close, they're very small percentages, but they are there. And the basic term is if we invest in a company and they become hugely successful, then we should get, the public should get some reward for that. I don't think the percentages are as high as you find in other investment communities. But in general, the companies that we receive royalty payments from are normally happy to do that because they're doing very well. And in our case, you pay royalties based on your commercial sales and success, as opposed to just your growth. So I think I would encourage people, if they look at that and they get concerned about the IP, look at it close, because we've had a lot of people that have misinterpreted what the IP is, and gave it much more credit. I can tell you, we've done a lot of investment, and we haven't had a lot of IP back, but the companies that have paid us back are still out there.
Okay.
So building a company, it takes time and talent and treasure, and we have many constituencies that go into helping build a company, and many different financial entities. So one constituency and one entity that can help is our services companies, like a law firm like Wilson, and another are government entities, like California Energy Commission or the National Science Foundation and so forth. And they're wonderful because they provide non-dilutive equity. And then we have accelerators as well. And you have corporate strategic partners and private equity firms and venture investors. And so I'm kind of representing some of the, I guess I'm representing more than just the angel group, but the VCs and the private equity and corporate strategics and so forth. And so for that group, I would say that a way to think about it is that if you're building a company in terms of time and talent and treasure, you need a lot of those things. You need connections, you need access to resources and assets, you need help with identifying people to hire and so forth. And so I would look for, the way I would think about it is that it takes more of those, time, treasure, and talent, than it does to build a house. And it takes less than it does to raise a family. And you're building a company sort of in between those two. So look for your financial partners, your venture investors who can help in all of those categories, right? All those different things it takes to build a company, not just write a check, because you need more than that, or we all need more than that. I'm more of an entrepreneur than I am a venture investor. I started my first company when I was a sophomore in college, and my personal experience is it's much easier, much more fun, and much more rewarding to be an entrepreneur than it is to be a venture investor, right? Right. So I don't think I mentioned this before, so let me elaborate on a little bit. In the angels community, with the Band of Angels, our typical round, you guys mentioned some numbers, our typical round is between 300,000 and maybe $1.5 million on a round. That's our typical participation in a company. And we would like to participate going forward in future rounds, as we would introduce you to other financial investors, venture investors in the community, whether it's VCs or private equity or corporate strategics. And we have cultivated relationships in all of those communities to a great extent. Have I answered your question? So we're looking to put.
The question is, and you can wrap up yours, and then I'll go to Don. But just what strings come attached to any funds that you give out?
Well, we're looking to be a partner in the sense of ultimately an equity partner in the business. Sometimes it takes the form of a convertible note on the front end, but we're looking to put things in: time, talent, treasure.
Okay, Don.
Yeah, it's a really good question, because I think that it's really important for entrepreneurs to focus on what the best resources are for them. For us in particular, our funding is grant funding we provide is government funding, so companies have to have all their I's dotted and T's crossed in that sense. We also do take some equity from companies, so 1% to 6% in warrants. So the purpose of the equity is to align us and our success with our company's success, which is really important for us, and we're making introductions to venture investors and others as well. So there is certainly a cost, but we can talk more about that as we talk to each company. It's different for every company. I mean, we say we have 32 portfolio companies and 32 different stages, so we really try and make it customized to each particular company.
Okay. So if people have questions, we have a mic in the center of the room, and I think it's fair if we just go through, if you can line up. I see two people here, so why don't you go ahead and give them room to step out into the aisle, if you don't mind, or to the microphone if you have questions. That way everybody can hear.
Thanks, yeah.
Hi, Nicole Schutz. The hat I wear today is I work with Cyclotron Road, which is a hard tech incubator out of Lawrence Berkeley National Lab, focused on energy technologies. The question I have for you guys is, especially with the venture exit from this space in the past couple of years, there's this sort of overriding story of energy technology is a failure and poor investment prospects. But I wonder, from your experience, what are the companies, the entrepreneurs you've worked with that should really be celebrated, the successes, the leaders in this space that new energy entrepreneurs can look to for inspiration and guidance?
Is your question, who are the success stories? Is that? Well,
other than Tesla and
you could start with Tesla and Solar City, but certainly Sun Edison has done a great job. And I mentioned NBA Polymers before. I think they're a fantastic success story.
Okay.
So there's 4.
Yeah, one in our portfolio is actually a transportation company, Ride Scout, which was acquired by Daimler Chrysler. And I think that they're a really interesting company because they are taking data and basically putting it on your phone. So they rank by time, cost, and calories, different ways to get different places. So it's social, public transportation as well as cars and things like that. So really simple idea, but really powerful tool. So that's one company that we really like in this space.
So one of the examples
Power is another one. Yeah.
So one of the examples we used is a small grant. We had a couple individuals that got a small grant to prove their storage technology. They literally did it in the garage. And they built a few cells, tested them, came back with test results, gave a final report to us, and their system performed 50% better than they expected. They took it to venture capitalists and picked up $4 million in venture capital firm, started the company, and then DOE came out with an award, and then and literally 3 years after winning the small grant, they had a large contract with the Department of Energy, which we also co-funded, and they're building a bigger system now, a grid level system, so that and they're doing well, and they've had a few other contracts that have followed there. So I mean, so that this was a case where they started with small, and they just were successful. Timing has a lot to do with it too, but the point was they used a small contract to prove their concept. The fact that they had a third-party contract as opposed to just doing it themselves was important to the venture capitalists, and the fact that they had state participation was important to the Department of Energy, helped them get selected. So we have several cases where people have actually started with a small grant, built something, and then built it into a company. Not quite as fast as they did, but that's an example where it is very possible to have some funding. And the fact that you've got third-party financing and a success story to tell was useful for them.
And can you reveal the name?
Primus Power.
Okay, great, thanks.
So I would actually, a man I admire very much is Vinod Khosla. And I think there's two ways to look at inspiration. I actually know one venture capitalist, by the way, that will not invest when the CEO hasn't had a company fail. And it's actually true. And this fund wants to have someone with scars on their back. So I think if you look through the portfolio of Khosla, you would find he's very willing to take risk, and so there's a fairly large number that have not made it, and there's a large number that have. And if people are looking for inspiration, one thing Vinod is very careful about is seeking out very good leaders and scientists and so on. I think he's very proud of the fact that he has in his portfolio of companies more PhD scientists working in his portfolio companies than General Electric has in their entire organization. So I would actually, that's a really great resource to just look through those management teams and see, not be looking for the successes all the time. Be looking for the ones that have had some successes in their lives, but it's not bad to see what fell down too.
Thanks. Next question.
Michael Monhop, the Mobility House. You all mentioned that storage is a hot topic. Does this also include vehicle-to-grid business models?
Which ones again?
Vehicle-to-grid storage business models?
Wind?
Vehicle-to-grid.
Vehicle-to-grid.
So
Electric vehicles.
So you store energy in your car, and then, you know.
Yeah, so I mean, I can give you the specifics on that one. So yes, we're investing quite a bit in vehicle-to-grid technologies. The PUC has determined that vehicle-to-grid technologies can be part of the utilities storage portfolio. The Department of Defense has the largest vehicle-to-grid demonstration going on right now in the world. LA Air Force Base is the first base they're doing it. So there's a lot of effort. The governor has a goal of 1.5 million vehicles on the road by 2025, and we believe that vehicle-to-grid success will make a big difference, so we are investing. So we do see vehicle-to-grid as one of the choices. It does two things for us. One is it makes it a grid resource, which means it can make smart charging decisions in addition to being part of the resources. So I think vehicle-to-grid is an area that you will see more and more investments over the next 3 to 5 years.
Yeah, so I'll give a contrarian opinion. I think it's for if the fleet if there's somebody has control over the fleet, so they can manage it from the grid, you know, like a government fleet. Maybe that makes sense. But I think that for the private fleet, I think it's difficult. I mean, you know, there's obviously every time you go through a cycle on a battery, there's some wear and tear on the battery, and how do you account for that? And then like sort of my gut feel. I'm talking really from gut feel here, not first principles. And my gut feel is that it's a secondary solution rather than a primary solution. I mean, if we had a lot of PV, a lot of wind, and a lot of storage, primary storage, you wouldn't do it.
So I think the answer is there's disagreement in the field and worthy of another debate. And we'll take another topic.
My name is Xiu Lin. I'm involved in the development of high-efficiency electric generator as well as motor. My question is it possible to get funding if the invention was developed and still reside in foreign country? If so, how do I go about doing it?
And is that to a particular person? Maybe Wilson? Or
well, I just give, again, for the commission, we do have a lot of technology and companies that are outside of California, but our contracts require, since this is state-funded through ratepayers, there's a minimum percentage that has to be spent in California. So the technology doesn't have to be developed in California, but normally the demonstration and normally the work is done. So in our case, you have to spend a certain percentage of the funds you receive in California, but you don't have to have the technology built in California.
I would agree with that. If it's a technology that you're going to be relying on IP and so forth, it's perfectly fine if it originates in Europe or Asia or wherever. I don't think anybody cares where the technology originates, but people do sometimes care. And the venture people probably don't want to be flying to Europe or Asia to manage their companies. So where it actually moves forward is important, but where it started I don't think matters.
Yeah, so I think Vern hits a good point. Is it doesn't matter where it starts, but I think your stronger and better venture investors and venture partners will want to be close to the company where it's being built, and and if it's more than an hour's drive away, you can't really help.
My follow-up question is, if that's the case, can I form a company in the United States, still have the development and all the work done in foreign country? In my case, it's Taiwan.
Yeah, I think it's where do you need the help when the company needs help? What do your constituent partners do? Do they get on a plane and fly to Taiwan, or do they? This is a tough problem.
Money is what money is what we need.
Well, is that all you need?
Well, it sounds like
you're
a
sure
candidate.
That's all you need? Right?
Sounds like you're a
no,
candidate for the
yeah.
conversations panel that'll happen, and Larry Kelly will be on that. So, and it sounds like there's a little bit. There might be some constraints around specific types of government funding. After that, it's more around the convenience of the partner, and you have an opportunity for a follow-up in the conversations with Action. Thanks.
Hi. My question is say if somebody has an idea and has made a prototype and he wants to start a startup, so should he just start the startup directly, or should he wait and get the patent first and then go for the startup? Because if you go for a patent, it takes time. And should I wait till I get the patent and then should I go for a startup? On the other hand, if someone goes for a startup directly, there are chances that his idea or his prototype can be taken by some other company and they can start doing that.
So it's not necessary to get venture money that you have an issued patent, and you definitely should not wait for that. The venture people are very sophisticated about IP. Some of the venture investors I know are probably better IP lawyers than many IP lawyers. So if you have filed your case, you're fine, and they will assess whether it will issue and so on. So having it issued is not that important. That said, having it filed is pretty important, because once you go out and start talking it up with especially the government, to be honest, a lot of that material is going to be public. And as a result, it might blow your ability to ever get a patent. The U.S. government, I don't know what the California state does, but I have seen more than a few entrepreneurs trip. They get an SBIR or government grant. One really important thing to remember is the day that grant is funded, it's made public. And if you haven't filed your patent before that grant is funded, you've probably blown your patent rights, because a lot of that information is probably in your grant proposals. So I think, does the state publish their grant proposals?
So I will just give you my personal thoughts on that. And as I have people talk to me all the time, and I simply tell them, I don't want anything. Everything I get in my office is public. If someone challenges me, they'll win the battle and they'll get whatever you give me. And I'm just saying, so I just tell people, if you're that sensitive, I'm not the guy to talk to. You should talk to somebody else. If you want information about the market and stuff, I have people come talk to me all the time. I got an idea. What do you think? And I can share with them what other people are doing, what the market's looking like. That's fine. But I tell everybody, don't give me anything you consider proprietary, something you would be wanting protecting, even trade secrets, because I'm not able to protect it in my government job. So I just tell people, I don't want to see it. Don't give it to me. We can talk about things, but nobody can copy my brain. But the point is, you need to protect what you have. You need to get some. If you're in that point, I think we had a question before. I would say you would need legal help to help you, so you didn't make a mistake. I'm not an expert, but all I do is I have people come to me all the time and they give me documents that say confidential. I said, well, we're done. I don't want to see it. If you have to put confidential on the first slide, don't talk to me. Go find somebody else, because I can't protect it. And so I do warn people at the very beginning, but we do have people talk. And so, like I said, I can share people information as they make their plans of what the market's doing. But I would, anybody who's got smart information, I'd just say protect it. And I agree, the government has a hard time not sharing stuff publicly, and so the person who loses is the individual.
Larry, were you going to jump in?
Yeah, your question sounds like a subset of a bigger question, which is a question about resourcefulness. And when there's no cash in the bank, I think, right? You're describing a situation where there's no cash. You should you incur the expense of a lawyer, right? Right. Yep. Yeah. So here's the way to think about it. So the person that comes in and says, I've done this and I've done that and I've done this other thing, and I'm ready to go and do some more, but I can't do any more unless you write a check. Okay, so that person is over here, right? And there's a spectrum, and on the other end of the spectrum is another person that comes in and says, I have this idea for this thing, and I'm going to have to patent it. And I talked to Vern, and Vern's going to help me out, and he's going to file a patent when I tell him to, and he's going to, and we're going to do an equity deal, and he's going to put some money from his fund, from the Wilson Fund in, and I need a box, so I went over to Home Depot or Fry's, and I found this other thing that was used for something else, and I took it apart, and I took the guts out, and that gave me the box, and I had on my shelf, I had this microcomputer that I used for something else, and it's not quite right, it's not fast enough, but I twiddled with it, and then I had my cousin write some firmware, and he got some stuff from SourceForge, and we did this, and oh, you know what? I'm late. I have a customer who's going to give me an order. I'm late. I'm going. Are you coming? I'm going. Are you coming? All right? All right, okay. So over here is I can't do anything more unless you write a check. And over here is I'm going. Are you coming? All right?
And you can follow up in the conversations.
Hi, John Fife. I'm a PhD student here at Stanford. My question was some of the energy startups are kind of high tech and large margins and stuff, but when you talk about electricity generation or water, you start getting into commodities with very low margins, and I think that's why a lot of VCs kind of bailed. And so now we're seeing government partners or corporate partners. How does that affect people going to VCs? Do you still go to the VC first? Do you come with partners? How should we think about forming these partnerships that might help with these lower margin, but electricity contracts for 30 years that are going to pay off maybe down the road? I think one of you were mentioning kind of this issue earlier. So, what's the new approach?
I think this is one of the places where we see a lot of companies, and one of the reasons why companies are coming to places like Hawaii or islands or Japan or places where you have really high costs and you can actually come down the cost curve, and then you're basically a better fit for other commodity markets. So for one example, in Hawaii we have about 12% of our homes have PV on the roof, which is much higher. California is about 1%. Most places in the U.S. about 0.5%. So creating lots of challenges on our grid with integrating all of this solar on the rooftops. We also have a very large amount of wind, so lots of variable generation. So what that means is that energy storage makes a lot of sense there because PV and energy storage is much cheaper than grid electricity. And there's RMI's grid defection report sort of laid this out really beautifully in terms of the commercial and residential markets. Right now, PV and storage is cheaper than grid-tie electricity. So what we're seeing a lot is companies coming in this space and saying we can start this here now and come down the cost curve. The same is absolutely true in energy efficiency because the rates in Hawaii are between 35 and 50 cents a kilowatt hour. Very similar in many of the other sort of island areas, and Japan has very expensive electricity as well. So one of our companies, IBIS Networks, is an energy efficiency company. Started, actually I see the CEO back there too, but they started in Hawaii working on bringing down energy costs in Hawaii, and where the margins really make a ton of sense for energy efficiency, and then partnering with large energy services companies and others to scale that in California and elsewhere. So it's really a question of segmenting your market and understanding it. I think that the energy, as well as water and transportation, these are a series of very specialized, localized markets that depend on the regulatory framework and the pricing in those markets. So really understanding how to segment those is critical for early stage company in this area.
Yeah, what she said. Those high cost markets, electricity in Hawaii is what, 35 cents a kilowatt hour or something like that. Yeah. So the difficulty with the energy space is that we've been doing this for 30,000 years, right? And we only had IT for semiconductors for 60 or 70 years. So they're much earlier on the learning curve, which in the IT space we call Moore's law. But that's why the improvement in performance that we see in the energy space is, or clean tech is, 2, 3, 4, 5% a year. So that's tough. So you have to it takes a long time to get there unless you can make a bigger step, right? And what are we competing with? Electrons, photons, methane molecules, water. These are all commodities, and they all compete on just price. Well, if you can get delivery, if you can get them, they compete on price, right?
Hi, I'm Bill Lear with the University of Florida. I have kind of a jump ball question for the panel. So suppose that you have a fairly simple technology, but it's an innovation, and it doesn't take very much money to fund, and it'll pay off in about a year. You'll have people lined up, right, to invest in it. But what if you have a more complicated a more complicated technology that has a much bigger, wider spread impact, but is more costly to develop? Where do you go for the funding? I'm talking $50, $100 million. Right? Where do you go for that? It's kind of outside of the normal VC range. Pardon? I'm the only one who didn't get the joke, man.
Well, I'll just tell you in general that when you have an idea like that, it's not uncommon, but the basics principles of being able to communicate come in. I mean, how well can you communicate what you're doing? How can you communicate the unique element you bring to the table? And how well can you communicate the eventual commercialization of that? Whether it's $50,000 or $50 million is not as important as how well you can convince people to invest in your ideas or you as a person. So I think you have to get back to putting it into a package that is sellable.
You want me to tell you about it?
But we can talk at the break, the next session.
In addition to venture money, I kind of alluded to project finance, they call it. It's the buzzword these days, I think, around what are effectively very complicated large loans. And so there are groups out there that do project finance. It's a whole different world, and it's going to be, they're probably willing to accept a much different risk profile than a venture investor. You have to somehow get from that venture place to the project finance place when you have something that has huge infrastructure capital costs. So it's you got to get over that hump, and it's hard.
Yeah, okay, here's a quiz. Everybody who thinks entrepreneurs take risk, raise their hand. Okay, I'm going to respectfully disagree. So great entrepreneurs don't take risk. What great entrepreneurs do is they find out a way to either get rid of the risk or get somebody else to take it. Right? Okay. So my advice would be make a list of all the risks involved in building that $50 or $100 million facility, right? And find out how to get rid of each one of those, right? And so part of it is going to be scaling the technology, right? So you got to build something that works, and then you got to figure out how you're going. What are the things that are going to happen as you scale to up to 50 or 100 million? So you can get rid of those. And I think if you do that, there's too much money floating around looking for great deals, right? So what do people look for? Who's the customer, right? Can you identify the customer is the person who pays the money, by the way. What's the customer's problem from the customer's point of view? You got to have a good answer for that. The technology has to do what it's said to do. You have to have evidence of customer traction. So if you've talked to maybe 100 different customers and gotten some orders, that would be a good thing. You got to have a barrier that's more than 2 or 3%. It's got to be a pretty good barrier. And then you got to have a really, really great CEO. So those are 6 things on your list to put down for, there's probably 50 on the list of risks. But start with those, right? And go for it.
Yeah, I would just echo that the financing, in our experience, doesn't seem to be a problem for companies who have demonstrated customer traction and need. So as long as you're focusing on the customer and what value you're providing to them, the money will follow those kinds of deals. So, I mean, we have companies in our portfolio like Ambry that Vern mentioned and STEM that have raised north of $50 million and raised project finance funding as well. They're some of the most competitive deals to get in the country. So it's not the question, it's not how much money you're raising, it's how well you're able to tell your story and demonstrate real progress toward milestones with your first few dollars. I mean, that's really critical, saying that with these first few dollars we're getting here and we made it and we surpassed that, now we're going here and we made it and surpassed it. And the money follows those kinds of deals.
Yeah, thank
Well, unbelievably, our last question concluded exactly at 2:15, which is when our session concludes. So thank you so much to our stellar panel.